Hello, my lovelies. Welcome back to this episode of What's on the Menu. We are still walking our way through your challenge foods. Have we got one for you today? Coffee. That's right. We're going to talk about healthy alternatives to that ever needed cup of Java that most of us are completely addicted to. Now let's talk about why I did this one. All right, because first off, next to sugar, coffee was the number one thing that you guys told me in all of our surveys that you struggle with eliminating when you're trying to adopt a healthier lifestyle. So why is it important to get rid of the coffee? Why do people tell you to get rid of the coffee? Couple of things. I know any of you who have watched any of my other videos, anything else that I've put out, been to any of my workshops, listen to me in any capacity, I harp on hydration. It's so important. And because caffeine actually strips the body of hydration along with very important nutrients like your B vitamins, your magnesium, your potassium, manganese, and zinc. It's super important that you're not consuming this in large quantities or even on a daily basis. Instead, go for something that maybe gives you the flavor, like dandelion root, which I'll talk a little bit more about at the end of the show today, or herbal teas that give you that same kick. And even look into things like live juicing. Those are the three things I'm going to talk about today to help mitigate the responses of the body to caffeine. When we do this chronically, caffeine leaves an acidic ash internally in the body, and that means that when we consume it and are not balancing things out, or when we consume it too often, and when I say too often, that's like, those of you who have to have a cup every morning. Those of you who just cannot function without your coffee. That's too much. That's too much. You're going to create an acidic environment inside of the body, and that makes the body susceptible to viral activity, bacterial activity. That acidic environment actually is exactly where those little pathogens want to set up shop. And so then your body is in a state that it's harder for it to fight those off, and you're going to find that you get sick more often. The other thing that I want to bring to everyone's attention is that caffeine is a neurotoxin. Caffeine is a defensive response by the plant to ward off bugs and little vermin that want to eat it. It's toxic. And somehow we have decided that this makes a yummy drink and we must have it. We must have it. And the largest portion of that comes from the addictive quality in any kind of chemical, and particularly in neurotoxins. We see this with drug addiction as well, that once the body is depleted of the nutrients that is stripped out by those substances, the response is similar to euphoria. There's a release of dopamine and serotonin and other feel-good hormones at the onset. In addition to that, caffeine then stimulates the adrenal glands, which makes us feel like we have a rush of energy because as they're being stimulated, they're releasing some adrenaline for you, so you get a little boost. And then you crash because the adrenals weren't meant to be on all the time. And then we go back and we get a refill and we repeat the process, which again depletes us of lots of nutrients and lots of hydration and all of the building blocks that we need. And as something that creates an acidic environment, then chronically it will also leach calcium out of the body because the body will pull calcium out of wherever it's stored to toss it into the blood and realkalize it if it becomes too acidic, because if it maintains that, we die. And so long term, what we'll see are things like osteoporosis, tooth decay, kidney stones, kidney failure, trouble with the liver, and things like that. So today we're going to talk about 3 ideas that I'm going to give you for alternatives to coffee. And the first thing I want to say is, before you go right to these, drink more water. Drink more water. You'd be amazed at how much energy that you will have if you are just well hydrated. So after you've gotten well hydrated, then we could start with some other things that help with that, or do this in tandem. Start upping your water and including some of these as a replacement for coffee. If you're a 1 cup a day kind of person, try replacing that coffee with some of these ideas. So we're going to do some live juicing today, and I'm going to talk about the nutrients and how the foods in these live juicing recipes help to support reversing all of those things that caffeine does to the body, help with withdrawals when you're coming off of the caffeine, and also just are incredibly tasty and fun. Like, I haven't actually juiced in probably like 4 or 5 years, and I had forgotten how much I love it. We're also gonna do some herbal tea, and I'm gonna talk about a store-bought, or you can make it yourself actually, coffee replacement. Let's get in the kitchen. There's been a lot of questions about how to brew tea, the correct way to brew herbal tea. So I'm gonna walk you through making the perfect cup of herbal tea. We're starting out with water. Now, the ratio is 1 teaspoon of herb to 8 ounces of water. And I do recommend that you use the same kind of water that you would drink, spring or artesian water. I like getting the extra minerals in there, so that's my recommendation. You can also do this with distilled water, which gives you basically dead water, and all you're getting are the nutrients out of the herb. We're going to start off by putting this on a medium-low heat for my little bitty pan here. And you can get a tea kettle and make it fun and do that. But we're going to heat the water to a slow rolling boil. I've pulled out my personal teapot, and I love this one. I think I got it at the vitamin shop. It makes about 2 cups of tea, and it's got its own little reusable infuser in here, which is fantastic. So this just sits down, and this little filter infuser can also simply be put down into a coffee cup or your teacup and steep your tea right in there. So what we're gonna do here while we're waiting on our water to heat up is just go ahead and put our herbs in there. So I'm putting 2 teaspoons of dried nettle leaf into this. And when our water's ready, we'll get it steeping. So here we are with our water at a good rolling boil. We're ready to get this going. What we're gonna do is pour this over the herbs. You don't want to dunk the herbs in this. You want to pour it over the herbs so you get a nice saturation of the herbs as the water pours over and through them. Nettle is a superfood. It's packed full of every nutrient that the body needs in very high quantities, especially B vitamins. And because of this B vitamin content, it can keep you awake if you consume it too late in the afternoon. So I don't recommend consuming nettle tea after 1 p.m. Before that, you can have as much as you like to tolerance. From here, we're going to cover this up. And the purpose of putting a lid on it or a plate or something is to make sure that as the steam evaporates, we don't lose too much of the volatile oils that are in that. So we want that to stay in the tea. Those act a lot like enzymes within the context of the teas, where they haven't been concentrated by distillation, and it's just being included in the extraction process. We're gonna let this steep for 5 minutes, up to 20, and then we can strain and drink it. All right, so it's been about a little over 5 minutes, and I have let this steep. We're gonna go ahead and take and strain out, and I love this little infuser because straining is so easy. Now you can use a metal tea ball or a silicone tea ball. I don't recommend using cloth tea bags or paper tea bags. They tend to absorb the volatile oil that we've taken the time to cap off our tea so that those oils don't escape. So we want to keep those in there. Avoid paper and cloth tea bags. Stick with metal or silicone. All right, so basically my tea is ready. I can just give myself a good pour into my favorite teacup here. And from here, I can drink it just like this. I could add in a sweetener like stevia or something like that to give it a little bit of sweetness if I have a sweet tooth, which I do. I have a bit of a sweet tooth. However, this nettle tea, I really do like it plain. This and red raspberry leaf are very palatable for me. Try it a couple of different ways and see which way you like it best. So let's dive into the ingredients for this simple power-packed coffee replacement juice. I've got 2 medium-sized carrots, 2 apples, you can use any color apple you want, and a medium-sized beet. You can also add things like kale or spinach to this. Those are packed full of nutrients, especially B vitamins, and great to boost the energy first thing in the morning. As far as equipment, we really only need a few things. I've got a good size cutting board, my chopping knife, a vegetable brush to clean the veggies with, and a fruit and vegetable juicer. This is the kind that separates out the pulp from the juice. And I like using this one. I'm going to break it down for you in a little bit. You can also use your blender. Takes a little bit longer. And to actually get a juice rather than a smoothie out of that, you'll need to take one extra step at the end, which is to take the liquid that you've created in your blender and strain it through a piece of cheesecloth or muslin to extract out the pulp.
Let's have a look at the juicer now, and I'm going to take this apart for you, explain the parts, and put it back together. So on the top, I have stored my little pitcher, which catches the juice as it comes out of the juicer. And that's just kind of the easiest way for me to store that. Then there is the chute, and my chute has 2 different parts. One that you can take out of the middle, and then there is a hole down the center of the larger chute for smaller vegetables like carrots and celery and things like that. Then, of course, there's the main chute, which comes out to reveal a very wide mouth. I have 2 little levers on the side that open up and allow you to take the lid off. And my particular juicer catches all of the pulp inside of here. The centrifuge just lifts right out. And then the basin that catches everything lifts out. You can see on that basin also there is a spout. And of course it goes back together in reverse order. So we will pop the lid on, lock it in place. And the chute also then acts as a pusher for any of the vegetables that you are putting through here. Here we have the on and off, and there are 2 settings on this. And I like the multiple settings because the higher setting does well for harder vegetables like beets and such. Now on the front by the spout, there is a lock and unlock. Unlock allows the juice to flow.
I've cut off both sides of the beet, and we're just going to give these a little wash. The next step is to cut your veggies. Now, my juicer has a pretty wide mouth, and I did that on purpose because I don't have a whole lot of time in the morning to do a bunch of chopping. So we're gonna set our carrots aside because those are gonna run straight through. And for the apples, I'm just gonna cut them in half. And the same thing with the beets. Just in half. And then we're ready to run everything through the juicer. If you're using a blender for this, you're gonna need to cut your veggies into pieces small enough that are easy for the blender to blend them up and liquefy them. Okay, so I've set my juicer up with a pitcher here to catch the juice coming out. On my juicer, there is a lock and unlock position. Locked will keep the juice from flowing out of the spout. Unlocked is where we want it to start juicing. And all I need to do, everything's already put back together. I'm going to take this main part out. From here, I'm gonna start feeding my produce into my juicer, and I'm gonna turn it on the side here. We're gonna put it on a 1 to start.
Juicing, we are going to start by putting one piece of produce in at a time and pushing it down with the tamper. And I'm alternating the fruits and vegetables, the produce basically that I'm using in order to mix the juices in better. I've chosen these particular pieces of produce because the content of them is so rich in B vitamins, which is where we get most of our energy, and one of the important vitamins in assimilating other nutrients that tends to get sucked out by caffeine consumption. You can add other fruits or vegetables to this. Just make sure that you're following the food combination rules. Dried fruits and apples go with anything. Other fruits need to be consumed by themselves. So if you're making a juice with fresh fruits other than apples, you want to make sure that you're sticking with fruits. For this one, I'm adding the apple and the carrot mainly because they pair really well and the flavors blend well. And because they are packed full of mega nutrients. Apples in particular are superfoods, and of course, beets, along with being packed full of good B vitamins, are also packed full of magnesium and calcium and a whole host of other nutrients that help wake us up and get us going in the morning without overstimulating the adrenal glands. So as I'm pushing all of this through, again, I'm alternating, letting it run through. You can also add in vegetables like kale, spinach, even throw the beet tops in. Those are also going to have a huge variety and a large quantity of vitamins and minerals that are going to help supercharge you first thing in the morning. After feeding all of the produce through, I'll allow the juicer to finish macerating it and juicing it out, then turn off the juicer and allow the remainder of the juice to flow out of the spout.
Taking this apart to clean it is equally as simple as putting it together. I'm just going to open it up. I'm going to scrape out any of the pulp that's in here, and I'm actually going to save this in this bowl to put in my composter. Lift that right off. Then our centrifuge comes right out. We can just dump that. And you can put most of the juicers in the dishwasher nowadays. My dishwasher is out of commission right now, and I find that just cleaning it in the sink is sufficient. I don't really feel the need to deep wash it every single time that I use it, especially if I'm juicing more than once a day. Typically, if I'm juicing in the morning and then again in the evening, I'll just rinse this out really good, let it drain, and then give it a good wash with soap and water in the evening.
I'm gonna take a minute and make sure that I clean all of the debris and all of the excess pulp off of each component of the juicer so that nothing gets caked on or stuck on, and also to avoid the growth of bacteria. So I'm brushing everything out, making sure that I'm rinsing it all really good, especially the centrifuge. This little puppy right here needs extra care. I am making sure that I'm scrubbing this out. I have this brush that I'm using, but you can also use an old toothbrush. Some of the newer models come with a brush specifically to scrub this out. You want to get every particle out. Be really meticulous with this particular part of the juicer. I'm spraying it out here to make sure that I'm really knocking everything out and getting every particle that I can. If anything gets stuck in that, it becomes like concrete when it dries out, and it's impossible to get it out, and your juicer won't perform as well. So in these little perforations here inside of the centrifuge, and also these smaller blades here at the bottom, you want to make sure those are cleaned out really well. And the rest of it is just rinsing and cleaning it up really well.
But before we end, there's a couple of things I wanted to share with you. Also, some alternatives or substitutes for coffee. And one of those is dandelion root tea. Good roasted dandelion root has a nice, almost chocolatey mocha flavor to it. And I used this years ago with my ex-husband. We were still married at the time, obviously. I made this man's coffee for 6 months using this dandelion substitute, and he didn't realize it until I left the can sitting on the counter. It's a great substitute. Dandy Blend is the brand that I really enjoy, and I will put links to a resource for that in the description. And since dandelion root is such an abundant crop, pretty much all over the United States and most of the world, you can harvest your own dandelion roots and make your own coffee. I will link that in the recipes for you, and have fun digging in the dirt. Also, I want to remind you guys that if you are drinking decaf coffee, the process in which that is decaffeinated is often more chemical ridden than just drinking the caffeine to begin with. So go for caffeinated if you're gonna do it rather than the decaf. And then look for ways to simply substitute the coffee with something else for the majority of the time to feed your body, keep you healthy, and then occasionally enjoy that cup of coffee out with friends. Remember my 80-20 rule. If 80% of the time we are consuming what we need in the right proportions and the right combinations, then our body can handle the 20% of the junk that we throw at it. So that doesn't mean that you can never have coffee. But if most of the time you're consuming a healthier alternative, then the damage that's created by caffeine is lessened by simply only having it once in a great while. And your body can handle that and even work through it so that it mitigates any of the bad effects of caffeine. All right, that's it for our show today, guys. Until next time, guys, be kind to yourselves and be kind to each other.